Hello, Opening Pathways viewers. It's Tom LeNoble. I'm excited about my guest today. I have Nikki Barua today, and Nikki Barua is the co-founder of FlipWork. And we're going to learn about FlipWork, but we're going to even learn more about Nikki. So, Nikki, welcome to the show.
Tom, such an honor to be on the show with you. Thank you for inviting me.
I'm so excited. So let's get started and dig in. Tell us about FlipWork, but I also want to know what sparked your idea to start it.
So my personal journey has been one that's been all about reinvention, going through different stages of change and constantly looking at reinventing myself and adapting to all of that change. And I've been in technology for most of my career. And with the advent of AI gaining mass adoption, what was very clear was companies were investing in the technology, but the humans were getting left behind. And the real challenge for so many people was not understanding and knowing, how do I reinvent myself in the age of AI? If you keep holding on to the old playbook, you can't figure out what's the new way of leading and thinking and doing. And that's really the challenge that FlipWork is dedicated to solve, which is helping people reinvent how they think, work, and lead in the AI age.
Wow, great. And was there a moment when you said to yourself, yeah, this is it. This is going to be my path.
So interesting story. I actually went through a lot of sort of personal setbacks over the past, couple of years. A lot of change. Lost my mom, who I was very close to, and had to take on a lot of family responsibilities. And through that period, I kind of had this deep desire to only dedicate myself to things that I not only felt deeply passionate about, but I could be on that mission for decades to come, not just the next cool fad or the next market opportunity. Like, what is my path of contribution and impact that I could just stay on and just keep serving and play in my zone of genius, not just based on a business plan or a business strategy. But I didn't know what that looked like. I just knew kind of where the answer needed to be. I just didn't know what that meant in terms of a real business idea or a real company to build. And during that time of contemplation, I just had a lot of senior executives from major companies that are in part of my network and reaching out to me for advice. And the same theme kept popping up over and over again, which is, I work really hard to get to the top. Now I'm at the top of my game, and it seems like the ground beneath me has completely shifted. And I just am afraid of becoming irrelevant. I don't know how to, play in this new world. And I feel like, I'm non-technical and I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do. And they're basically really battling with this identity crisis of, being at the top and feeling like they're a rookie in this new world. And I was just helping all these people out. And I realized, wait a minute, there's a lot of people in the world that need
There's
the same.
a lot of people.
Yeah, and it's not just about reinventing in the AI age. It's also, my personal journey has been about continuous reinvention. And there's something that I know about how you reinvent in a systematic way that gives me a way to help so many people. And it just literally started with that as a concept, and we iterated on the product, until it just kind of really took off. And
I love
then,
this.
yeah.
I love this. If you've read my book, you know I'm big on reinvention for sure.
Yes,
Um,
absolutely.
so tell me this, if you look at yourself today, how are you fundamentally different than when you started Flipbook?
You mean me or the company?
You, yeah, you.
Yeah. For me, what's really different from where I thought I was starting out was that this process of helping other people reinvent has filled me with a tremendous sense of gratitude to be able to do this work, but also humility that no matter how far you go and how much you achieve, there's something deeply humbling about not being attached and being willing to work on yourself with a beginner's mind, and that every chapter of our story is part of what makes us who we are. There's, it's, I think your words are, they're terrible gifts.
Yeah.
And, it resonates so much with me because I think about, where I started, what I was struggling with at the time that I was trying to figure out what next. And I felt like I was at rock bottom personally. And yet coming out of that, I found a platform to help lots and lots of people. And it's both deeply gratifying, but also deeply humbling. And seeing that as, that every season of your life is exactly what it's meant to be, because without it, you wouldn't be who you
I love that. So I love FlipWork. Tell us about how you came up with the name.
are. It was actually in the middle of I've been invited to speak at an event, and it was on a totally different topic. And somewhere in there, in the post, speech Q&A, somebody asked a question about, like, what's the biggest challenge for people to like deal with? And I was like, you got to flip the script. You have to be willing to flip the script, and unlearning is actually even more important than learning. And where people get hung up is that they focus on the learning part, but they haven't shed the things that they're still carrying with them into the next chapter, whether it's identity, behavior, mindset, skills, whatever that is. We can't fill ourselves with something new unless you're willing to empty the cup and let go. And flipping the script is really, really hard. And so I kind of said, flip the script. And something about it really resonated with the audience, and it just stuck with me. And I kept thinking maybe the company should be called Flip the Script. Then I discovered Netflix actually owns the trademark. So,
Uh,
so it led to FlipWork, which actually matches what we do much better. So,
yeah, I like there's the
yeah.
two FlipWork is kind of I like it a
Yeah,
lot.
because we're really helping people flip how they do work and,
Yeah,
who they are at work.
it rolls right off the tongue. So, I found on this podcast, and I love this question, that if we look back to when we were really, really young, someone planted seeds of who we became, who we are today. Who was that for you?
My dad and my mom, and in two very different ways. And I'll share the story of kind of how that was so deeply influential, from a very young age. I think I must have been probably 6 or 7 growing up in India. And it was at a time where, India was a closed economy. So there wasn't a lot of exposure to the media, certainly not to the Western world, no foreign goods, none of that. So, like, you kind of had a very sheltered upbringing. You only knew the people in your neighborhood. And where I grew up, girls went to school so they could become suitable brides, and women stayed at home to raise the family and cook for the family and basically be good wives and moms. And that was all I was exposed to. That's literally what I was around. Well, my dad, he created this collage on the inside of my closet door, and in that collage he had pictures, like newspaper and magazine cuttings, that had pictures of powerful women leaders. Indira Gandhi, Margaret Thatcher, Amelia Earhart. And like he kept adding these photographs and pictures on, sticking it on my closet door. And in the center of that, he sketched out my face and wrote down my name. And he never said a word about it to me. So he didn't say, like, oh, I'm putting this up as inspiration, so I want you to grow up to be like them or do this. Never said a word. He just kept adding pictures to that. Well, the effect on me was that every day when I opened my closet door, I would look at these pictures, look at this collage, and I was fascinated by who these women were. And I got curious, and I would start asking questions about their lives and learning through stories. But most importantly, I saw myself in the center of that. I was surrounded by them. So that idea that, like, you know, the it kind of created this, imprinted this idea that your reason for being is service and contribution, that it's about, life is about creating impact. And that's what all these leaders have dedicated themselves to. But it also created this idea that you can do it too. I believe I can, that it's not just for famous people, that I belong amongst them, I'm surrounded by them, so I can do that too. So it filled me with a possibility, one, that the purpose of life was giving, but everyone has that gift to be able to give and to help others.
Mhm.
And so that was one of the greatest gifts that my dad gave me at a very young age. And then my mom was just this incredibly bold, courageous entrepreneur and risk taker and just a total badass. I mean, she was 4'8", tiny woman that took on the biggest adversaries. And I saw her just have operate with such high integrity and courage and tenacity that that collage that my father introduced in my mind came to life by watching her in action. So that was what has shaped
I
me.
love this story. So tell me, Nikki, what personal values have guided you from the start? Which ones deepened lately?
Curiosity, uh, hands down, the enduring value through every version of me. Curiosity has stayed constant. Um, then I would say they've changed over time, and I've consciously changed them over time. Curiosity has remained the same. Um, the next one would be courage. Of it's easy to get curious and fascinated by ideas, but it takes tremendous amount of courage to follow through and stick to it. Even when it gets boring or dull or painful, when you encounter setbacks. Um, Curiosity can be somewhat selfish sometimes because it's something you wonder about and you're fascinated by. Courage requires a level of selflessness, because you do it because you need to serve other people. And then the one that has really taken center stage in this season of my life is contribution. I'm fascinated by being able to scale impact because we actually now have access to technology that allows us to do that and help more people at scale.
I love curiosity. I am a very curious person, and I have been since I was a kid. It's certainly got me in trouble a few times and served me well a few times. So I love curiosity. We'll have to talk about that one more later.
Yeah. I'm curious. I have to ask this to you now. What are your core values
Um,
and what are they now?
I would say that one of them is integrity, which gets used a lot, but it's really, really important to me, along with trust that um, who I am is really who I am. And if I
Mm,
say I'm going to do something, I do it. Um, and the two people that I think three people when I was young, my mother gave me compassion, taught me
mm,
compassion. My father taught me the integrity. And in a situation, again, if you've read my book, you know there was not a lot going on there as living in the shack, but there was a lot of which I learned later about integrity and especially the compassion that was being shared for others, and so important to me for
mhm,
sure. And
yeah.
so I think those are high up on my list. And I'm like you. As I've traversed life, they've changed a bit.
Mhm,
And we're going to have a question later that's one of those things that changed for me dramatically too. I'll tell you about that when we get there. So
yeah.
tell me this. Where has life asked you to slow down recently?
Oh, such a good question. Um, I have experienced burnout 3 times over the course of my career. And each time I felt it at the height of my success. It was the peak, and I just hit burnout and literally burned out. It's the flame went out, and I lost passion and interest and struggled physically and all of those things. And I've spent a lot of time reflecting on why that is. And before I studied it, I used to assume, oh, it's too much work, I'm too stressed out and too much on my plate. And what I discovered, the through line of all three episodes was misalignment. It had nothing to do with hours or the stress. Um, I have tremendous endurance and energy. It actually had to do with misalignment that I was not fully conscious of. Sometimes it was misalignment with stakeholders, sometimes it was misalignment with the work itself or the direction that my life was taking. And it's something I became acutely aware of not just assuming that because I set a vision or a goal and I'm walking down that path, that the alignment stays true. Sometimes we change, even though the goal hasn't changed, and you have to constantly keep coming back into alignment.
Mhm.
And so I've made that a weekly practice for myself. And it's interesting you asked this question because literally 2 weeks ago, I realized I felt misaligned. And it was so subtle, but it was starting to pop up in how I felt on Monday mornings. And I've always said, thank God it's Monday. And I realized I no longer wanted to say TGIM. I felt like I was ready to say TGIF. And I was like, ooh, that's a
Yeah.
massive red flag for me. Something is off, and I couldn't name it. And after going off and disconnecting for 8 days, I finally realized where the misalignment was. And it was actually on my calendar. I'm doing work I love with people I love, literally living my dream, but I wanted more time for writing, and my calendar was not reflecting that. And it was literally that discovery of saying, wow, you know, it's not the hours. It's
Yeah.
just, I want to be more in alignment with my zone of genius and what I love to do. And I have to get back to that.
Yeah. Viewers, there was some great wisdom just shared by Nikki, and you might want to do a little rewind right now and listen to that again because I think our concepts and what we're taught about burnout is not really what burnout is about. Nikki, I had an experience recently. I was feeling a little misaligned, and I was with a coach because if you're a coach, you should have coaches. In fact, I encourage people if you are seeking out a coach and they don't have coaches, run.
Mhm.
A dentist doesn't fill his own teeth, his own cavity. So, but this person, after I talked to them for a while, said to me, I have a word for you. I don't know what you'll do with it, but I have a word for you. And I'm like, okay, what's the word? And he said, pruning.
Mm,
And it was interesting for me because at first it was, I thought of my yard, which is fortunately going to get some attention this week. I thought of a few things, and it's forming really well, and it's very accurate of um, when we get, I love your word, misaligned, and where we can put attention to it and
mhm.
very easily get back in alignment when we're willing to look at it. So thank you for sharing that with us today.
Mm.
I'm curious, what is your relationship with risk? How has it changed since you started FlipWork?
Hmm. So watching my mom build her business, I'm an only child, so I don't have any siblings. And my dad's a doctor and my mom's an entrepreneur. And from a very early age, I think I was 2.5 years old when she started her business and bootstrapped it and did all kinds of things. But I was on the front lines of watching her take risks. And while there were a lot of sort of long-term gains from that, there was also a lot of short-term suffering. Choices that she made that put our family at risk, almost lost our home. There were lots of very painful experiences. And it was very clear why we were experiencing that pain. It was because of the risk, So it was interesting for me to kind of make that association very early on. But at the same time, I also saw that without that risk, the impact wouldn't have been there. What she was able to do in her life and what she created wouldn't have been possible. Um, So I had a very positive relationship with risk, but I, also saw, that it's not about the setbacks or the failures you experience, that risk and resilience are two sides of the same coin. You need both of those. You can't claim to be resilient if you've barely taken a risk, and you can't take risks if you don't have the stomach and the resilience for it. But all growth comes from that. And that's what led me to leave India and come to America with nothing and, follow my big dreams and trust that this is the place where it would come true. That's what led me to this, kind of walk away from my corporate career and become an entrepreneur. That's what's led me to make choices throughout as an entrepreneur that were always headed in the direction of what set my soul on fire. That's probably the best way I can describe it. It wasn't about a specific goal. It was, the indicator for me was, do I feel alive? Am I living in full alignment with who I am and what I'm meant to do? And if it's misaligned, I'm going to make the changes no matter what risk or pain or penalty I have to pay for that. And that's where the resilience comes from that. And I've gone through many seasons of all those kind of experiences, but I can truly say that the growth has been exponential because of that.
Yes, yes, yes. Tell me, how does Nikki decide when to pivot or push through?
That's such a great question. Uh, uh, it's been, this is where, full transparency, that to me has been an area where I've struggled with self-doubt. There, there are times when pushing through is the right answer, and there's times where quitting and moving on is the right answer. But I have not found a formulaic approach where I can put in, the variables into some kind of algorithm and it spits out the perfect answer, that I can rationally follow through on. And when I've struggled with that, where one part of me says push through, another part of me says pivot or quit, I've struggled with that and question, am I missing the judgment? What's lacking in me that I can't figure this out? Here's what I've learned to trust through that process. Whether you choose to push through or whether you choose to pivot, the point is just to keep moving in the direction that you've chosen and make your peace with it. You just have to accept the consequences of your decision, because ultimately it's about being fully accountable, taking ownership for your choices, whether it's the hand you chose or the hand you were dealt. Just accept that and do what's responsible and do the right thing through it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. What did last year strip away that you're grateful is gone?
Expectations of where I'm supposed to be at a certain point in my life. I lost my mom 18 months ago, and after her passing, I realized how much of my life and career choices were shaped by wanting to make mom proud. That I would get to a certain level or build, have this title or paycheck or wealth and significance, so that she would be proud of her only child. And I did not make that connection immediately on her passing, but as I was working through the grief, I realized that all of the expectations I placed on myself, and mostly it was about timing, not just about how high I climb, but how high I climb, how fast, that thing of, oh my gosh, I've missed my prime. Why am I not already doing this or that? that so much of that timing pressure came from how I wanted to impress my mother. And when she was gone, I just felt this odd sense of liberation and letting go to say, I don't have to do that anymore. It doesn't matter what I do next and how long it takes. It's just the journey.
Yes.
And it's actually, talking about alignment, it allowed me to really examine every choice and do it from a place of total freedom, um, and zero expectations.
Yeah. It's a journey. Without a doubt, this idea of, it's inevitable, right? I have a talk I do called Living Fully While Dying.
Mhm.
And it really sounds heavy, but it's not. It's really to get people in touch with that this life, at least in this body, whatever the great mystery is that we all either believe in or have thoughts about, but in this body is finite. And it's the only guarantee when you're born. And I think for those of us that get to that age where our parents um, start making their transitions and how that how we shift and how that changes us as we move through and everything from realize our own mortality to
Mhm.
how we reviewed and how we um, move and transverse through that is really interesting to me. And I think that one of the things I have learned in these many years is that while grief, time, and memories and the love of others can ease it a bit, it has its own plan. And no matter
Mhm.
what we do, we're forever changed when these people that are so dear to us for a variety of reasons are no longer here in the physical.
Mhm.
So I wish you peace on that journey as you move along that. So
Thank
tell me this,
you.
how do you recognize when fear is information and not a stop sign?
Hmm. Um, so for years, I prided myself on being fearless, that I was someone who could look fear in the face and keep moving forward. Um, until I realized that was total bullshit. So that, in fact, that was not true. That was what I was telling myself, that of course I felt fear. I just had not learned to cope with it in a healthy way. So it was showing up in other ways. Um, Even though I could be brave in action, but it was breaking other parts of me that no one else could see. And it just wasn't healthy.
Mhm.
Um, I then actively started studying, how you work through fear and how, all the different kinds of fear and all of that. And what worked for me was sketching as a way to even identify and name the fear. What is that? It's not just fear of the 50,000-foot level, but what is that really? Is it like fear of loss of reputation or relationships or inadequacy? What are those things that I'm feeling? Because I realized I didn't know how to name the emotions, and I was so in my head all the time that I felt disconnected from my body and being able to actually feel the emotion physically. And once I could feel it and name it, I didn't know how to release it. And sketching became the vehicle for that.
Wow.
Well, it was a somatic experience because I was able to just let the pen guide what's showing up. And my very dear friend, Sheila Darcy, she actually created this daily practice called Sketch Poetic, and she's got a great book on that. And it was one of the most transformative and healing experiences because I developed a healthy relationship with fear as opposed to calling myself fearless and really being unhealthy in how I processed it.
I love that. I love that. Yeah, I've learned in this life that fear has been an interesting thing. And to me today, fear, even the dreaded imposter syndrome that we talk so much about are simply opportunities for growth,
Yeah.
just simply opportunities for growth. So, what
And
value?
if you allow yourself to just feel the feelings,
Yeah, be
you
there.
know, it's magical how quickly it actually passes. If you actually had to put a timer, it doesn't take that long for it to
Yeah,
pass,
I
but
was,
they feel so daunting and overwhelming in the moment that you feel like everything is crumbling. And so being able to sit with it and allow it to pass through, and for me, using sketching as a vehicle for doing that, I feel like my capacity for fear has increased, but also it just becomes a catalyst for contemplation. It
yes,
just becomes like, oh, I'm feeling something. Let me like reflect on it. Let me observe it and see what
yes,
it is. And invariably, I discover that it's a signal that it's an area where I feel incompetent. That's the most common thing I find. Like, oh, I'm missing a competency. Okay, well, then I just have to build that competency. I need a coach. I need an expert. I need a class. I need a mentor, whatever it is that I need to gain better wisdom or skill around. That's one of the indicators. And the other area that I've most commonly found is it's a signal for ignorance, meaning there's something I'm supposed to make a decision on that I don't have enough information about. And so it leads to a quest for gaining that information. So there's
yeah,
light instead of darkness. And
more wisdom.
signals have been super powerful.
More wisdom here today. I spoke with somebody the other day, and a lot of her work revolves around helping CEO that level of people um, just not react, just be with what happens and let it go.
Mhm.
And it was very interesting to me. And then I thought about what it was for me. And one of the things for me that I find fascinating is observing myself when I
Mhm.
get in whatever the state may be of just kind of separating myself a little bit and looking at and observing just, okay, what's going on here? And
Yeah.
most of the time I kind of end up laughing about it. It's like, well, was that really that big a deal to get wound up over or have a reaction to? And
Yeah.
I love it. I love these
Yeah,
things.
it's, it also teaches you to not take yourself so seriously. You
Yeah.
know, so much of our fear is grounded in what we worry that other people will think or what we'll think of ourselves, and all of those, significance driven expectations. And when you just sort of let it go and say, who cares?
Yes.
Just
What
don't take
does
it.
um what does legacy mean to you at this phase of your life?
Honestly, not at all. And I'll explain what I mean by that. Um, my mom spent her entire life thinking about legacy, and doing things that were about building legacy. And when she was gone, the world moved on too. But what remained was the people that she actually helped, right? The impact remained. Legacy didn't really matter, like I don't remember my grandparents. I don't even know the names of my great grandparents or their parents before that, so legacy used to mean, even 5 years ago, if somebody had asked me that question, I would talk about, oh, I want to leave a legacy of unlocking people's potential and doing this or that, or that's why I speak or I write or advise and all of those things. Um, I don't care about it anymore because it doesn't matter. It's what you do every day and how you help people, and who you are. That's all that matters. And if you've lived a good life and you've helped as many people as you could when you're gone, hopefully, they live better lives because you existed, but
Yes.
you don't need to be remembered. I don't care about that as anymore.
Yeah. Nikki, tell me this. What have you learned about trust since you started FlipWork?
Hmm. Um, Trust, for me, is something that is entirely about integrity. Um, are you the kind of person who's gonna do what you said you would do? Um, and are you the kind of person who does that even when no one is watching? Um, and it's as simple as that. I don't have to like the person to trust them.
Hmm.
And they don't have to like me to trust me. We just have to operate in integrity and congruency. Um,
Yeah.
and it's also helped me filter much more effectively than in the past because it removes, any of the. It's easy to give lip service to ideas, and it sounds sexy or cool in a slogan of things you stand for and things you'll fight for. What really matters is that showing up through action. And so I trust the action, and that's really what it comes down to for me.
Hmm. Tell me this, Nikki, if a much, much, much younger Nikki were watching this podcast we're recording, what would you tell her?
You're perfect as you are.
Love this. Yeah.
I spent
So,
way too much time trying to figure out how to fit into someone else's
mhm.
vision of me or someone else's world that I wanted to belong in. And I think we're all perfect as we are.
Love this. So, if your story could leave my listeners with one invitation, what would it be?
Dream big, dream really, really big. We have one life, and it can be full of freedom and adventure and experiences. And all of that is available to us if we stop putting ourselves in a box, playing by rules defined by someone else. The first step is to give yourself permission to dream really big.
Thank you, Nikki Barua. Thank you for being on Opening Pathways today. Nikki Barua, co-founder of FlipWork. Nikki, I don't do a part two very often, but I have a feeling you and I might have to do a part two because I think we've scratched the surface on some things we could share and talk about here on Opening Pathways. Tell us where we can find you.
You can find me at nikkibarua.com, where I also write a weekly newsletter. And then if you want to explore FlipWork, go to flipwork.ai.
Wonderful. Thank you for being on Opening Pathways today.
Thank you for having me, Tom.
Absolutely. And to my viewers, this is Tom LeNoble, and I'll see you next time.